back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the show. Just Energy Radio is brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can jumpstart your intuition today by downloading their free, new and improved, updated guide to called Jumpstart Your Intuition. You can find it on the website, www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. It's also brought to you by soulhealer.com, where you can discover all the products and services I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, energy healings, and psychic readings. I've also updated the webpage, and so if you have been wanting to get an autographed copy of ET Chronicles, you can now go there and get a book directly from me, which would always come signed, which obviously is priceless. And as I mentioned in the first hour, we are going to be making hard copies of Icon, Deconstructing the Archetypes of the Ancients, DVDs that you can actually order from the site as well. And I will keep you apprised on that with the pre-orders and blah, blah, blah. I'm not even going to go over it again. Okay, so in this hour, we're going to be speaking with Edward Nightingale about the Giza template. And let me tell you a little bit about Ed. Edward Nightingale presents a compelling case with a precise geometric mathematical model that recreates the architect's original design of the Giza Plateau. Based on 16 years of research, back engineering... All right, hang on a second. Sometimes I make these things and it doesn't even make sense to me. Based on 16 years of research, back engineering the design of the pyramids and the Sphinx at Giza, Ed Nightingale has rediscovered precisely how the architects of Giza used geometry and math to encode a stunning amount of knowledge within the architectural design of the Giza Complex. His book is The Giza Template. His webpage is thegizatemplate.com. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Edward Nightingale. Hey, Ed, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Dr. Rita?
I am doing great. Nice to have you on the show.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I have heard that you're going to be at the Paradigm Symposium in the beginning of October.
Yes. We're really looking forward to that. We had a great time last year, and it's a great event.
Well, I'm going to be there too.
Yeah, so I see. Yes, that's
like
great.
Two great people all in one room. Well, wait a minute.
Meet.
And Laird's going to be there. So
Laird
like three,
Scranton.
well, and his wife, who
Lisa.
I don't say her name on air because I try to be nice. So there's going to be like 4 extra great people all in one room.
That's right.
So anyone that's listening, if you want to hear Ed give a presentation, or if you want to hear me give a presentation, or if you want to get to meet Laird, he's a good friend of the show in person. I'm trying to think who else is there. Thomas Fusco's going to be there, Micah Hanks. We have a bunch of people. Actually, I have Scotty Roberts and John Ward coming on in a couple of weeks. So I'm sure we'll be talking about the show then. But yeah, it's an event that if you listen to this show regularly, you will probably recognize many of the names of the speakers that are going to be there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, enough about that. Ed.
Yes.
What got you intrigued by the pyramids at Giza in the first place?
Well, I guess just as a builder, I was always interested in the design there and curious as to really what stood out for me. I think first was the lack of, hieroglyphs or any markings of these alleged egotistical pharaohs failed to leave there. I guess there was possibly hieroglyphs many years ago on there. Herodotus, I guess, talks about them, but anyhow, just the design, really.
And so that's what got you interested. What kind of a builder guy are you?
Well, I've just worked in the building trades, really worked my way right up to, I'm a master woodworker. I do a lot of architectural millwork, design, and installation, and, just doing a lot of drawing in my business, architectural type drawing. and was always interested in how the Giza Plateau was laid out. And to me, it always looked like a complex that was designed as one complex, not just three separate pyramids. So that's what interested me in the first place. And I had an opportunity in 1997 to go over with John West to Egypt, and I did a little looking around, and I saw what I thought was the center of the complex and took it from there.
What you're saying is that you thought that there was like a grand design to the whole thing, and I'm going to liken it to the Twin Towers and like Building 7 and that whole complex down in New York that obviously isn't there anymore, but it was constructed as a unit and not a tall building over here and a tall building over there.
That's exactly right. And it's funny you should mention that spot. But anyhow, yes, it was laid out as a complex. And to me, the best theory that I had heard was that it was used as a repository. In other words, they encoded number and geometry in these structures. And that's what I looked into.
According to tradition, the pyramids were supposedly built, all right, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but many years apart for different pharaohs. And how would they do? All right, maybe I'll phrase it in a different way. Do you believe that that is how they came about, that they were actually built for these pharaohs and then they just magically ended up being in these perfect locations? Do you think that they were built at a different time, to be something in particular and not necessarily tomb chambers?
Yes, it was a design. It was a very deliberate design that was designed mainly at one point in time. And that time obviously would have had to been, probably the date that the Sphinx was carved, I believe was, the beginning of the complex. Now, when that was is debatable. And there's a lot of speculation that it's going to be a lot deeper in history than we're led to believe, which I would kind of go for that too. But just like any building project or large engineering project, you would go in and do all the foundation work first. So you would level your site, you would prepare, each of the sites, the individual pyramids, whether they would have to be leveled off or built up or whatever to conform to your design, you would start there. And that's why I believe most of the foundation points within the pyramids and the Sphinx are all seem to be much older than the upper parts of the structure. And I believe that would be logically achieved by builders designing it precisely that way.
Okay. You mentioned the Sphinx being possibly the first structure that was constructed as part of this complex. But what always kind of bothers me about the Sphinx in general is that you would think it would line up with one of the pyramids. But it just seems like it's just kind of callywampered over to the side, like either it was done later or that they just try to ignore it and they built this other stuff behind it.
Actually, it's very precise in its location. If you were to stand in front of the center pyramid, the Pyramid of Khafra, and you would stand about 350 feet to the east of the face of that pyramid, that's where the center of this circle or the point where I determine the template begins is right at the beginning of the causeway that runs down to the Sphinx. Now, if you were to stand at the beginning of the causeway of the Sphinx and you were to look due north, and then you simply went 259.2 degrees around a circle, you would line up right on the Sphinx's head, just like a clock. It's just like a clock, the hand of a clock. And the Sphinx causeway would be 7/13 of the circle. It's really quite simple, and that's what the Sphinx is. It's acting as the clock. That's the keeper of the time, and where we would view the heavens from Earth to mark any movement.
Okay, so now I'm thinking, okay, so if the Sphinx is a clock, see, shows like this are always make me crazy, because then I start thinking, and then it's like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be doing a show. On your book cover, you show the 3 pyramids, with the littlest pyramid being in the upper left-hand corner. And I'm just saying that so that the listeners kind of get the sense of what I'm talking about.
Right.
And I'm just trying to think, you know, when they showed the image of like Orion's belt that Robert Duvall and Graham Hancock show, is it the same alignment? But anyway, okay, so the Sphinx is at the bottom of the page. Which way is north?
North would be to your right. West would be at the top of the page, or you would be looking west, the way the sun travels in the sky. From east to west, they were mainly concerned of that motion, not so much north and west. So this is oriented basically east and west, with the Sphinx looking due east.
Okay. And so the Sphinx would actually be at about, I have to look at my clock, like at about 3:15, 16, about 3:18 on a clock, because it's not really like a whole 5 minutes later. Okay. I'll just put that in my little memory bank. Okay.
Okay. Well, essentially, the Sphinx would mark the zodiac, or the procession. The Sphinx, that's the Sphinx's job, to mark that movement. And you mentioned Robert Duvall and his Orion correlation theory. The 3 pyramids then also index on the 3 belt stars of Orion, and actually end up pointing out the sword in between Orion's legs, or the nebula. Actually, there's a M42 star-birthing nebula is there, and it actually is pointing out that with a spiral.
Okay.
They were basically just tracking the movement of the Earth, and they were using that one point at the Sphinx to watch the horizon and watch the movement of the stars from that point.
Because it was a fixed point now? Because they created a fixed point, and so movement from that point would be a derivation from that fixed point?
Exactly. So any timekeeping comes from that Sphinx, right between the Sphinx's paws, looking due east, watching the sky. That's how the whole calendar system all ties together, from that one point, and then having a clock. Well, we're using a Gregorian calendar in here, but that actually coincides with this whole alignment of 2012. The December 21st, 2012, at actually 12 hours, 21 minutes, and 12 seconds. That's when this alignment happened, and all the calendars will line up to that alignment from the Sphinx.
Did that really happen?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it lined up, and they were just pointing out a very major alignment right there with the center of the galaxy. That's why they were pointing that out, because it was such a major alignment. So that's what they're using to reconcile the calendar, that point. So at that point, at what I mentioned there, December 21st, 2012, at 12 hours, 21 minutes, and 12 seconds, if you look at the horizon from the Sphinx at that very point in time, you'll see what is on the horizon, and it's Orion, and it's all tied in with the Orion correlation theory. So they're just mapping the movement of our solar system as it's traveling through space. That's what they were doing when they were marking this, and that involves precession. The precession is, according to the academics, is from a wobble in the Earth's axis. But they really don't have a lot of evidence for that. They can't measure that movement against close objects like our sun and the planets. So they don't really, there's not a lot of good evidence for the Earth wobble theory. But what they're showing here at Giza is the fact that the motion of the solar system is actually on a spiral trajectory moving away from the M42 nebula in Orion's sword. That's precisely what they're mapping, and with that movement, our view here on Earth is the view of the zodiac, or the wobble. It's not a wobble, it's the view of the spiral movement. So it's really not that hard.
Okay, but what does that mean? Something of the spiral movement of the nebula between Orion's legs. That sounds kind of nasty, Ed.
Well, it's actually the facts of the matter. That's what they say. That's where we were birthed from. And if you look at that nebula, and you will see what's called Barnard's Loop. Now, Barnard's Loop is actually a spiral that emanates from that area, and it's a spiral of plasma gases and kind of electrical in nature. And you can see this spiral and trace that spiral, and that's actually the path that our solar system, along with, I believe, Sirius and the Pleiades systems, all three of those systems emanated from that same point, and are basically on, all three of them are on a spiral movement away from that point. And that's why Sirius precesses with us. It doesn't, we don't measure this wobble against Sirius, or we don't measure it against the Pleiades. That's because they're on similar spiral trajectories away from Orion. And what they're pointing out with Orion's belt and the three belt stars indexes the spiral on the sword, and the Sphinx indexes Leo, the constellation, actually the star Regulus in Leo, that rides right on the ecliptic. So they're marking those 2 points, telling us about this great year. And it's a cycle of about 25,920 years that we're on here. And I think at certain points within this cycle, there are changes in conditions here on Earth. And that's what they were warning us about. And that's why the knowledge was put in a repository, so that it would be able to be rediscovered if things fell, or things, if we had any kind of catastrophic type event here on Earth. They wanted to have a place for the knowledge to be stored. And along with that, they also used teaching methods, and created priests or groups of people, whatever, that would pass this knowledge verbally down through time as well, along with the architectural repository.
So what kind of knowledge were they storing?
Very high science, all the system of the complete system of measure, which is in the book. I mean, all my life I've worked with the measuring system, and I could never be given the answer, where does the measurement system come from? Nobody could ever answer that, and the closest I would get is, the length of the pharaoh's arm, is a cubit. Well, that's an approximation, but where did these numbers come from? That's what I've discovered here in this template, and a simple coordinate system that shows how a doubling system, and a tripling system work together. Essentially a trinity, the 1, the 2, and the 3.
Okay, explain.
Okay, in our graph, how we started out to try to understand the design of Giza, I started by using a circle and finding the center, what I thought was the center of the circle, and experimenting. And after a little bit of work, I realized that the circle that I had drawn that seemed to fit everything was the diameter of the circle would have been 9 units in length. And each one of those units were the equal length to the base length of the center pyramid. And I also was aware the Egyptians used an easy way to determine the area of a circle by dividing its diameter by 9 and then taking 8 of those units and simply squaring them. So if we have a circle of 9, we take 8 of the units and square them, and we have a 64 unit square. So that's where this template begins, a circle of 9 and a square of 8 by 8. Then by simply taking that 8 by 8 square and applying what's called let's see here. I should know this by heart.
You wrote the book.
Yeah, the lambda sequence. There it is, lambda, and the lambda.
But can I just make a smart ass comment or whatever?
Sure, if you want.
Didn't the ancients know that we would end up going to public school and we would never be able to do this math?
That's right, and that's why I pretty much try to teach myself all this stuff. So that's why I'm successful at this. I did not. I did not play well with others in public school system. So I kind of took it on my own to figure it out. And it's really, believe it or not, there's only basic mathematics in this whole thing. Division, subtraction, multiplication. That's really about it.
Yeah, but you're kind of talking like a physicist. You know, it's like, well, you take the 8 thing and the 9 thing, and then you lambda it, and you divide it by 2, and then square root it times the pi of this, and it's like, huh?
You know, we could teach this in middle school, and I'm not kidding you when I tell you that. I've actually had the opportunity a couple of times to speak at middle school, and they follow it very well, actually. And that's the problem. Everybody overcomplicates this, and they overcomplicate science in general. They need to quit complicating things. It's actually very simple. Nature does not use a lot of complexity in its system. It goes the easiest way for energy to flow. And when you're talking about flowing with numbers, which obviously nature uses in its Fibonacci spirals, as we can see, nature DNA. I mean, nothing around us isn't using that mathematical formula. So nature's using that in a way that it can deal with the 2s and the 3s. Okay, a doubling and a tripling system, when put together on this graph, all of a sudden make these beautiful numbers that work with the 2 and the 3, and they're really all these sacred numbers that you can name are probably on this chart. So it's a very simple coordinate-based chart that easily shows where the measuring system comes from, where the musical scales come from in music, and it's really not as hard as everybody thinks it is.
Right.
It is, really. I'm telling you, you got to trust me on this one.
All right, I'm going to trust you, but I don't know.
It really is. It's the whole system of measure is in there, and the measuring the musical scales, all that is right in there, and it could be very easily learned by.
Well, all right. So I'm going to throw a really weird question at you. So you're talking about the musical scales. Do the notes that the dimensions define, have you looked at what those notes are to see if there's a melody?
Well, not exactly, but I do know that like the main number that we're talking about here for the whole thing is the number 432. Now, that would be an A note in a musical scale, and that's the note that the Om, for instance, is hummed in Buddhism and Hinduism. The Om is, that chant is at 432 hertz or cycles per second. And that number is a key number really to this whole thing. For instance, that number sound, right? That's our idyllic note in sound would be 432. Well, if you were to square that number, multiply it by itself, you get the speed of light, very close to the speed of light, the number. So you can see right away how that 432 in a music scale works beautifully in the numbers that are used for the measurement of light, and so on and so forth. It just goes right up the scale, and it's really not that hard to understand. I know this was a very difficult book for me to try to write with all the numbers and try to explain it, but it's really once you look through it a few times and know what they're doing, it's actually a beautiful system and very simplistic in its nature.
I'm going to take your word for that. I will. I promise. And then, like, in October at the Paradigm Symposium, you can, like, sit down with me and work through because I even had a piece of paper and a pen and everything, and I was just like, I don't know.
That's okay. Believe me, you're not
looks
alone.
Smart.
It's something that, and I started to say this before, this is really kind of the foundation. And this is like the mathematical and geometric proof of what's encoded in this repository. But really, when all the dust settles, it all comes down as to, what were they really trying to warn us of?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, because if it's just a bunch of numbers, then, okay, that's nice.
Right. And that's just the point of it. And when you get into the calendar end of it, this is what's really, really important, the important part of this. But I felt I needed to get this first book out and get the foundation, because everything builds on this, and the calendar being the part that is the critical piece of the puzzle here. So what about the calendar? Well, if we look, we know the Mayan calendar began 3114 BC and ended on December 21st, 2012. And that was 5,127 years in length, duration, which is about a fifth of the cycle of this 25,920 year cycle. Now, the number 5127 actually is encoded in the third smallest pyramid, the smallest of the three large pyramids, is encoded in that angle. There's two angles on that particular pyramid, one of 51.84 degrees, which is the same as the Great Pyramid, and then the other angle is 51.27 degrees. So what they were actually doing there in that pyramid is they were showing that 1/5 of the great year of 25,920 years is 5,184 years. But now there's a little bit to adjusting these easy to remember numbers that can fine tune them into the correct number.
Is that like the weatherman plus or minus 40%?
Well, not quite, but let me explain in a musical manner that maybe you can relate to. If as a musician, we have a what is called a fifth interval, and that would be going up a musical scale. It'd be the 5 notes in a major scale that walk up the scale, and each one of those intervals, if you were to take 12 fifth intervals and added them up, and you went up the scale, so you went up 12 fifth intervals, and then you went up 7 octaves, those 2 notes would be very close. The one would be a doubling, if you're going up the octaves, is a doubling. So you're multiplying by 2. The other fifth interval, you're multiplying by 1.5. So at 7 octaves up, you have a note. And then if you were to go up 12 fifth intervals, you have a note that's very close, but not quite. So you have to correct that. In Western music, that has to be corrected, and that's called the Pythagorean comma. It's just, instead of multiplying those 12 notes by 1.5, which is a perfect fifth interval, we're only going to measure it out as 1.49. So when we do that 12 times, that note actually matches our 7 octaves. So then they're in perfect tune. It's just a part of music theorem about the difference between the octaves, which is a doubling, and the fifth intervals. So in order to get those 2 notes to sound correct, when we play it on an instrument, we need to adjust slightly to correct it. Well, the same thing has got to do with the speed of light. Needs to be corrected slightly off these perfect numbers, the 186,624, which is the number we get when we square 432. With that number, we can actually adjust that speed of light down to very precise speed. So that was incorporated in there, and it's just really fantastic once you understand what they were doing here and how all this works together beautifully. It's incredibly beautiful is really all I can say. They did a beautiful job of putting this together.
Where did you get your data to create these analyses from? And okay. I'm really having a hard time here.
That's okay.
I should have drank a glass of wine before, but then it would have been then I would have been laughing even more. So
that's okay. We would have had fun, right? But no.
No, but where did you collect your data to get these analyses from in the first place?
Okay, in the beginning, I was using a survey map by William Flinders Petrie was the main survey data that I was using. Another was a guy named Cole also did a survey there. And those two were basically in agreement on a few things, but there was also discrepancies between them. But as I was working on the idea and coming from a back engineering or reverse engineering it, in other words, I was just measuring what was there, I kept seeing this model that I ended up, discovering here, but nothing quite added up. The distances between the pyramids seemed to have issues that were just slightly off of what would be the ideal number that would make this thing all click together like a Rubik's Cube of number, If each number is put in correctly, then all of a sudden the numbers all the way across this plateau line up very precise and beautiful and related to one another. So anyhow, I had an issue coming up with those numbers using the satellite or the survey data. So I found a satellite image, and I think in 2006 I discovered that, and I purchased the image, which was very accurate. They claim it to be within 10 inches, plus or minus, in between the pyramids. Now, what you're seeing on the cover of the book there, the distance across that circle that the template takes up is about 1.2 miles. So to have, 10 inches, within that size, that's pretty accurate data. So when I used this satellite data, all of a sudden the mathematical model that I came up with fit perfect. I mean, there was just really no arguing about it. It was I used computer aided drafting or AutoCAD to create a full-scale drawing, and then literally overlaid the drawing of Giza on the satellite, and it was perfect. So, which was really interesting because I knew that the satellite image was correct and the survey image was not matching up to really accurate satellite data. So, I got to looking into that a little closer and come to the realization, and not really surprisingly so, is that not disputing Petrie's ability to measure at all. He was an absolute fine surveyor and quite capable. But for whatever, or I shouldn't say for whatever reason, because I do know the reason, but whoever put those survey the data out there actually gave it incorrectly for a good reason. And the reason was so that guys like me couldn't figure out this puzzle. And that's exactly what it is. It's a puzzle. And when you have all the information, the correct measurements, this is a very easy thing to figure out, really. In minutes, we can come up with all the base lengths that we need. It's a lot more simple than people think, and I think that's one of the main reasons why everybody's missing it. They're trying to read too much into it and overcomplicate it. And this was created for so that someone with very basic tools and very basic mathematical skills would be able to figure this out.
Right.
Really, I'm serious. I'm serious.
But is it something that you would have to survey the area or have an aerial photograph in order to figure out?
Well,
I mean, wouldn't there have to be a certain amount of technology on our end in order to be able to analyze what's there to decrypt what's going on?
Actually, this could be decrypted by having very fundamental surveying equipment that was available a long time ago. That these people could absolutely measure this with the accuracy needed to figure it out. But what was done was there were certain key dimensions in between the distances between the pyramids. That's key in this. It's the distances between the pyramids that were changed that didn't allow that Rubik's Cube to click together perfectly. You know what I'm saying?
But see, I think that's my problem, Ed. I could never do the Rubik's Cube.
Well, I couldn't really do it either, so don't feel bad.
Oh, I figured you'd be a whiz. It's like, a fifth of this and twisty and no. All right. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
But anyhow, it is a puzzle, and it's a puzzle to be figured out. It was designed to be decoded using basic tools, and once you figure out how they're doing it, they actually show you the next step of the next.
Ooh, what's the next step?
Well, the next step is really the bottom line here is the calendar, folks. We can talk about the measurements all day long, and they're precise, and there's just so many of them. It's we don't need to get mired down in all the detail, but we do.
Well, why do you think the surveyor? Because you talked about Petrie, but then there was also I did read the book, a coal guy.
Right, and he
was
also,
his stuff even worse than Petrie's?
Well, the distances between the pyramids, I've had a hard time getting a lot of the information. It's not that readily available, some of it. But Petrie had readily available the distances in between the pyramids. And that was really my key thing that really unlocks this puzzle. If you've got wrong information about the distances between those pyramids, then that completely throws you off the track. You really got nothing to work with there. But once these are clicked in just the right spot, all of a sudden all these numbers just match and work harmoniously in an incredible way that is so far beyond coincidence or chance that it's not even worthy of a note here.
But do you really think that they screwed up their information on purpose?
Yes. Yeah.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Why? Well, first of all, let's get into the scientific method here. I'm putting forth a blueprint here. This is a drawn from scratch. I show where all the initial numbers even begin. We put that all together, and all these numbers match up perfect, and then they happen to just leave these distances between the pyramids, give you other numbers, so you can't arrive at this. So it's absolutely was done purposefully. And one of the reasons I can tell you too, if you're looking in the book there, I did a little comparison in the book with the survey, the different surveys, and a couple of Google images and Petrie's own plan triangulation view. The only copy that I know of that is available to the public is what I have in the book there. And what's very interesting, that is a drawing that Petrie himself made by hand and using triangulation placed all the pyramids on the drawing. Well, if you take that drawing and you overlay the satellite image and the mathematical model, his drawing actually matches that very well, and it doesn't match his own survey data, the numbers that he just listed in between. So his drawing doesn't match his numbers. So he obviously, it was changed on purpose. And you can't get in and measure. You can't just walk in there and start surveying Giza. So if we're talking scientific method here, I should be able to go in to Giza and be able to prove Petrie's findings or substantiate his findings. But of course, they won't let anybody in there to measure. So you're taking the word of whether it's official government data or Petrie's personal data, whatever. We can't verify them on the ground. We can't get permission to just go in there and measure. But we have the tool of the satellite image, which is no doubt accurate enough to prove the point. And I think I can prove that very well in the book. And there's also a lot more data. Really, this book was pretty much slimmed down as much as I could.
All right, so I have a different question.
Sure.
So do you think Petrie provided bad information, or do you think that it was changed later on by somebody else?
Well,
I mean, a different question. So were you able to access Petrie's original data file, data set, or was it some derivation from somebody else that was reproducing it?
Well, that's really the case there. Yes, I was getting it off of, I forget his name the actual guy that archives all this. But I mean, either way, I think there's a lot of other researchers that use those same Petri numbers to ascertain their findings and all. And what's really interesting too is I think the design in itself, when you look at it with Petri's numbers that he gave, there actually is a very interesting mathematical geometry brought into it when you look at it from the numbers that Petri gave, which would be enough to be like a little thing that said, "Oh, you got it. You must have it because these two work. These numbers." So I think that was actually in the design, so that essentially you could look at it in the locked position, the tumblers in the lock there, the three pyramids or whatever. If they were clicked in the locked position, they were given a wrong number there, but it still made sense. It still made some mathematical sense. But if you had the correct information and unlock that and move those other two pyramids slightly to line up with the mathematical model, then it's an open book. I mean, people can figure this out. It's a beautifully encoded piece of work here that anyone can crack open once they, get the idea what's going on.
Maybe the pyramids moved, and he did take the right data, but they moved. Anyway, I'm moving along. And this is just for a curiosity thing. Have you looked at any other pyramidal complexes like the one in Mexico City to see if they have the same kind of mathematical arrangement based on the template that you've created?
Absolutely, and there is a ton. Believe me, and I say this with great humility here, but when people realize what is in Giza, all the rest is pretty easy to start figuring out. And believe me, it's overwhelming. There's so much stuff that it's hard to even write a book and finish it because there's so much more that just you keep discovering that, so that's where it's been for me. It's just been a deluge of information that, I'm hoping other researchers take a little bit of interest in and start picking up and using this template to look at other sites. There's definitely correlations.
Cool.
Yeah.
So who's been using this information?
Well, I guess we should just look around.
Do you think people have been using this information? Because
yes,
I obviously would not be, because I am just going to trust you that this makes sense, because it doesn't. Well, I'm having an issue. I'm having some trouble, but anyway.
That's okay. That's understandable. This is the pyramids we're talking about here. We're not talking about, if it was simple, it would have been figured out a long time ago in the public, maybe. But no, there are people absolutely that know about this, and they're using the science that's involved here. Nikola Tesla knew exactly what I'm talking about here. I think Einstein understood it as well too, but it's just been suppressed. This knowledge is a little like giving the babies in a playpen pack some matches to play with, I guess. And
okay, but right, back up. So you said Tesla knew exactly what it was, but if it was a clock or some kind of calendar system, then why would he care? Now, if it was a free energy source, I could totally see where he would care. Or was there other stuff going on in the pyramid complex that is in addition to the placement of where the pyramids are?
Yeah, there's all kinds of information put in there. There's high science. There's vortex-based mathematics. There's frequency information. There's the precise measure of the Earth. The complete, the whole measuring system, and then the calendar as well. Now, Tesla did understand this, and Tesla made a quote basically saying that, loosely quoted here, is like, if you understand the 3, 6, and 9, you will understand the workings of the universe. That was a rough quote by Tesla. So why was he so obsessed with these numbers? Why was Tesla, fixated on the 3s, the 6s, and the 9s? Well, that chart that we discussed earlier, the 8x8 square with a doubling system down the left side and a tripling across the top, that makes up this frequency scale that he was well aware of. And these numbers that are in that coordinate system, when they are summed, summing numbers are just simply adding the numbers together till you come to a single number, like 5 plus 6 is 11, but 11 is 1 plus 1 is 2. So we can.
Hey, Ed?
Yes.
They told me we need to wrap it up.
Okay, we can.
It's time. It's
All
time.
Right. Well, it was good talking with you, and I know this was a little bit of a challenge maybe for some folks, but it's really.
They need to just get the book, right?
Yes, exactly. There's plenty of graphics, and it's explained, and I'm open to any questions or feedback. If anybody needs a little help getting through it, I'll be more than happy to help them.
Yeah, and they can come to the Paradigm Symposium
yes,
in October.
Please come to the Paradigm
and hang out with us, and you can take them step by step. We can have a remedial math class together.
Yeah.
They can sit next to me, and I can cheat off their paper.
That sounds good.
All right, Ed, thank you so much. Oh, if people want to get the book, where can they pick it up?
Amazon.com.
All right.
Available there, and if anybody wants to give it a read, give me a review after you read it and see what you think.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Bye, Ed.
Thank you. Nice talking with you.
You too. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
That's Ed Nightingale. His book is The Giza Template. His webpage is thegizatemplate.com. Next week, we have Keith Blanchard coming on talking about For the Love of God, and then Mary Sutherland.
Until next time, remember, it's all just energy.